back in time to when I was 18. That was just a few years ago. A time when I lived in a town not too far away, a little town called Greenwood, South Carolina, where I had moved 2 years prior and finished high school. At this time, just out of high school and just starting the dating experience, I was dating an older man. He was a sophomore in college. And he had 2 friends that they were always together doing things. And so we would tend to double date or triple date. And so he had the idea of going up to the Biltmore House in Asheville. Now, I had never been there. And I was so excited about this trip to the Biltmore House. So we had planned it and had packed a picnic lunch. We get up to Asheville, and they said, now here is the plan. Back in those days, decades ago, you just drove up to a gate and you paid for the number of people in a car. Not that way today, right? So these are struggling college students. And they had the bright idea, 3 couples, 3 people would get in the trunk of the car and drive through and pay for 3. Well, the choice as to who was going to get into the trunk of that car depended on the size. And back then, I was much smaller than I am today. And I was one of the lucky, or should I say unlucky ones, chosen to get into the trunk of the car. So we 3 smaller ones get in. First, Kay gets in, and then I get in, and the last person to get into this trunk, and it was a big car, is Claude. And we hear the trunk being closed, and my date, Wayne, goes around and gets into the driver's seat. And he says, "Where are the keys?" Nancy, who was sitting next to him, said, "I don't have them." John, who was in the trunk, in the back of the back seat, said, "Well, I don't have them either." And they said, "Well, then who has them? Claude, do you have the keys?" Claude reaches into the pocket of his pants, and Claude has the keys. And we all start laughing hysterically. This is so funny. Until the reality hits. Oh my God, we're in the trunk of a car, and the keys are in the trunk of this car. Now, back then, we didn't have levers to release a trunk, which we all have today, right? So there was a lot of discussion. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? They talk, and my date gets into the back seat, and he starts pulling the seat, trying to find, is there a place that those keys can be passed through? In the meantime, John, being the person that he was, says, "I'm going to flag down someone to get help." So he leaves. Now we're in a parking lot, and there's no one around. We didn't want anybody to see this deception. So as we are in the back of the trunk of the car, Wayne continues to pull and tug. I don't know how much time went by, but I must say, it felt like forever. Now there are 3 people in this tight little compartment, and we're all breathing the same air, right? And there's not a whole lot of air, because there's no fresh air coming in. Well, I'm thinking, I'm going to die. I am going to die in the trunk of this car. And I start to panic. And I think because of my panic, my date really gets a little pressure and rips the seat. And somehow they manage to pass those keys through that little space. And it's like, oh my God, yes, thank you. So Wayne gets out of the car, comes around, opens up the trunk of the car. Claude comes out first, and then I come out. Oh, wow, I can breathe. I'm not going to die today. And then Kay. And about that time, John comes in with a cop in a dress. That's all he could find. And he didn't want us to die in the trunk of the car. So I'm thinking, oh, how do we explain why 3 people are getting out of the trunk of a car? To this day, I have no idea what was said. But you know, there was no crime committed. We were in a parking lot, acting like fools. And so after the cop left, and they said, okay, get back into the trunk. We're going to go into the Biltmore. And I said, well, I'm not one of those. Now, I was raised in a very religious family, and to cheat, lie, steal was not something that I ever did, believe it or not. And I had felt guilty about doing that to begin with. So I thought, this is a sign. I'm not getting back in that car. So instead, Nancy was the one elected to get back in. But you know, as I think about that, and I was away from the area for 30 years, but this friend, who we remained friends over many decades, we would get together and we would talk about this and laugh about it hysterically. So even though that day was very traumatic for me as I came close to my brush of death, it has provided an awful lot of laughter to reminisce and think about the times when I was so really crazy and foolish. Madam Toastmaster.